Thank you for joining us to mark Holocaust Memorial Day 2022. Diolch am ymuno â ni unwaith eto. This year's theme is One Day, Un Diwrnod. In one day, life can change. Mewn un diwrnod gall bywyd newid, for better or for worse. And on any day, and every day, even when life is difficult, we must challenge prejudice and discrimination against people who are just being themselves. Rhaid I ni herio ragfarn a gwahaniaethu. We are going to take a look at days from the past, the present and the future. The first section, we will hear from times of Nazi persecution by listening to extracts from Josef Herman's journal and from Francesca Danu reflecting about the day when her mother's life changed, the day she boarded the kinder transport. In the second section, and from the present day, we will hear Humberto Gattica's poem, inspired by his own experiences of fleeing persecution in Chile. Mujib Yahya tells us of his journey to find sanctuary and comfort in Cardiff, and how important it is for him to give something back to his community. In the third section, geologist Alan Bowring reflects on the human stewardship of the earth, and young Bella Williams tells us that we could all be refugees one day, climate refugees.
Lest we forget. 83 years ago, your father ran down a railway platform, crying. You, named Mickey Mouse, sat on your seat, tiny, still. Through the dark storm of Europe, a rumbling train held the children of the doomed. They went to welcomes on the flat east coast, where grey fen landscape absorbed their tears and kept them safe. After the storm lashed Poland, you went to lightning-flashed London, healed its pale children by day, watched for its fires by night. Your family, like others, slipped from streets like wraiths in the fog, from homes, from lives, possessed by the complicit. The heavy tread of soldiers, the lorries, immediately forgotten in the miasma of expediency. Father died in a ghetto. Mother disappeared in a camp. Brother survived the ghetto, survived Auschwitz, survived Dachau, his arms carved with numbers to assist in clerical records. Nationality, German. Occupation, pupil. Category, Jew. Cause of death, unknown. As if that simple denial could erase the guilt of just following orders. the disappeared of history, the genocides of millennia have been remembered by people who could not, would not talk of it. No one knew how they died. The incantation of the guilty. You sat and told your tale whilst people winced, shuffled at your words, the still motion of your tears. Fragile as an autumn leaf, trembling in the soft wind that was the approach of death. Your voice strong, your will of iron, making their minds hear the tale, still sharply silhouetted in your misty memory. Lest they forget, impatient with their ignorance, desperate that they saw your ghosts casting shadows, repeating patterns in the now, willing them to wish the refrain. Never again, never again, never again.
I'm sitting in Josef Herman's old studio in Ystradgynlais, and I'm going to be reading from his journal. Human engineering, eugenic improvement, racial cleansing. Each form of terror finds new words to make things sound better than they are. Civilization has not yet begun, and barbarism is not a thing of the past. One Warsaw night in 1934, I met with Zygmunt. We walked for many hours in the snow. It was a highly dramatic walk, during which I diverted him from the desire to commit suicide. With soaked feet, we eventually arrived at his home. We talked until 4 a.m. I lay on the table and tried to sleep. In circumstances unfavourable to living, we felt as if in a permanent siege. In 1942, I learnt that my whole family were exterminated in one day. I do not care to talk about it. I hate self-pity. 7th of June, 1948. A journey to Paris to see Pearl. Now I'm rather frightened to keep the appointment. Pearl was the last to see my parents. She herself, through underground channels and the resistance, was brought to Paris. But before she left, she witnessed the first gas vans and the liquidation of the so-called smaller ghetto where my parents lived. Why did I want details? What do these matter now? Pearl, oh dear Pearl, I want to see you and I'm afraid of you. I was afraid of tears, hers and my own. I sat on the bed and Pearl on the floor, a bowl of cherries between us. It was just like my younger days in Warsaw. I waited with my questions. And she told me in detail what she and the Poles with whom she had been living saw from a neighbouring street. The liquidation began at 10 o'clock in the morning, when the first gas vans arrived, and lasted until 9 in the evening. There were only German soldiers and Gestapo men and a small number of Polish policemen to carry out the murder. The first few hours, Jewish families and my family amidst them went freely into the vans, helping each other. But by lunchtime, each Jew had to be dragged in, and there was a lot of shooting and fires in some windows. The worst for me was over. I was numbed and slept the whole afternoon at Pearl's. The next few days I was ill. I must not think any more. Since I returned from Paris, I am continuously haunted by my father's face. The Sabbath best did not suit him, but in his everyday worn-out clothing, in his leather apron, I often thought him beautiful. The trouble with him was the way he held himself, ready to be frightened, as if the world had no place for him, only a tight corner. Life was hard on him, and he understood little of it. If a soul could be visible, his would have been all bruises. His was not a life that enriches life, but to kill such a life is gruesome. Who are these killers of his, to pass judgment on him? I always write with pride, Joseph, son of a cobbler. I have also been thinking of my mother, but suddenly I feel as though I have lost my voice. On a day like today, I could do with a letter or phone call that would give me courage to carry on. I cannot get out of my mind the victims of our century of terror. Nor can I forget Auschwitz, all the victims of our time. The list is too long. Their cry was their last freedom.
Those Who Arrived by Umberto Gatica. Those who arrived, almost unknowingly like mirages from a nameless country, in a city built of light, to survive like wounded reflections of a landscape whose air turns to thunder and their homeland into fear. They cross their mornings through the uncertain density of the fog, with no other language than the chill of the wind and the persistent sound of the rain.
My name is Mujib Yahya. I'm a performance artist, a youth support worker, and a single father. I was born in Ajegule, Lagos, one of the most segregated parts of Lagos in Kogi State in Nigeria, West Africa. On a good day, you will have your neighbors fighting each other. On a bad day, you have armed criminals in your doorstep trying to break in. On the worst day, you have high school pupils fighting each other with knives and bottles and things like that. So I grew up in that kind of environment, in a lot of violence, but I wasn't involved in any of it. I was calm. I was very shy growing up. My mom would say I walk as if I respect the floor I walk on. She was worried about me because I was bullied growing up. I was bullied because of the way I was. I was quite big at that time as well. You could see like all the stretch marks across my shoulder now. If I did show you, just from losing all that weight. My mom wanted me to leave because of that reason, because she thought I would be persecuted for showing my feminine side, really, for what we say, for being gay here in the UK. I didn't know that term, neither did my mom, but she still knew the consequences of being feminine as a man in Nigeria and born into a Muslim family as well. So I came to the UK. I arrived in London at Heathrow Airport. I was 17 years old, so I arrived when I was as a teenager. And I only knew one person at that time in the UK. I didn't have no family, and this was a very distant family, like I would say family friend. It was a week stayed there, and I had to find my own way then. So it was a roller coaster journey in London, ups and downs, sleeping on sofas, people's sofa, squatting, and getting used, abused, and I didn't speak to my parents, any of them, for a long time, especially when I found out they couldn't even afford my food money, let alone talk of my rent money. It got very bad in London. I was suffering with mental illnesses. I was suffering from addiction. It was gambling. It was cigarettes. At one point, because I couldn't afford it, I had to pick butts of cigarettes on the floor. So I went through that. I got homeless again in London, and I picked up my bag and decided to go to Portsmouth. But I got to Portsmouth just to squat at a friend's place. I met my child's mom now, so that was a trigger for me. My son Lucas. So I held him in the hospital when he was born in 2016. So just from then, I started feeling this sense of responsibility, like I have to be responsible for someone now. I contacted the Home Office myself and told them about my situation of being homeless and of how I want to give up. And they were quite helpful, which is not something you can say very often. But I got contacted and I was brought to a hostel in London. From then, transferred to Cardiff. At this time, I had sought asylum. So I'm now sought sanctuary in the United Kingdom, and thankfully I was brought to Cardiff in Wales, and immediately there was this sense of calmness here in Cardiff. It wasn't as fast and busy as the London scenes, and I was just the people around as well. I started going to Oasis Centre. Because I didn't want to stay in my room that was given to me by the Home Office. I started going to Oasis Centre where I'll play football, and these are the things that actually all the time, going through all of this, even in London, I've always played football, listening to music and dance. So these are the only things. I would walk on the road, I would just dance on the road so I'm looking at it now, I think, are you okay?
Just see outside.
Then I got involved with Oasis One Word Choir with the music as a member. So I'll go regular sessions every week. So yeah, so that's just that family there, that support. Like I haven't been around my family for years. It would have been I arrived in Cardiff in 2017, so it would have been about around 8 years. I haven't seen my mother, or my father, or my sisters, or my brother. So that was like the family there for me. So I was really welcomed.
So bright, a place we can share all of our beauty.
Yeah, Oasis One Word Choir, we're not a very big choir, but yeah, we're a community choir, lovely volunteers from around the community. Really keen to be a sanctuary kind of organization for people coming into the country, refugees, asylum seekers, where they can come if they're missing their family. They can see the Oasis One Word Choir as a family, and really we're using music and dance there as well. I was really fortunate in my journey. That's why I always encourage people. When people come to me, which I get a lot, is hear things like, "Oh, I've just arrived. Where do I go for this? I'm hungry. I only get £35. What should I do? I'm fed up." So I always advise people to kind of like, get somewhere, go volunteer, get a course in college if you can, and just try and upskill yourself while you're waiting. Myself, my application took 2 years, 8 months to process, and obviously in that time no income, and I had to I was looking after my child at that time as well. Even though his mom is here, I do have him regularly, and have a massive impact in his life. I'm always keen on giving back. Us as humans, giving back to Mother Nature, looking after the plants, looking after our environment, climate changes, and just to give back as a refugee, just to give back to the city that have taken me in, that have been so good to me, that's making me shine. If someone is coming to you for sanctuary, like, you should be really proud of yourself, like as a city, Cardiff, as a nation, Wales, embracing all these people, like your place where people will go to say, okay, I feel safe here. I'm, running from. I think it's something people should be proud of, and more people should aspire to welcome that idea as well.
I'm not afraid that we're all free, rising in solidarity. I'm not free till we're all free, rising in solidarity.
The beautiful Swansea Valley, as seen from Penwith. You can see Swansea in the far distance. If the seas continued to rise, this is what we can expect. We could all be refugees one day.
Down here at Lavernock Point it's one of those places in Wales where the geography of the country sort of comes to life. We can look one way at the estuary, up to the crossings way beyond Cardiff and Newport, and we can look the other way and we're looking down the Bristol Channel, more the Havren, along the cliffs, along the layered cliffs, the Jurassic rocks here, and they conceal ammonites and dinosaur fossils from way in the past. But this is a place that, for me, it's a place where the geography is special, the views are special, but it's a place full of history, layers and layers of history. I mean, we've literally got layers of geological history here, deep time, and it's set out in the layers of the lias, as it's called, the Jurassic rocks. But there's layers of human history here as well. So if we were to have been here 60, 70, 80 years ago, we think back to World War II. We erected defences against potential German invasion. Subsequent to that, we also had defences against potential nuclear attack. Earlier than that, we were worried about Napoleon a couple of centuries ago, so there were fortifications along the coast with Napoleon in mind. We go back a little bit further and we're looking, for instance, imagine in your mind's eye, we've got ships plying up and down the channel here. Some of them are going, as they do today, to the port of Bristol. Back in the middle of the 19th century, many of those ships would have been laden with a rather more awful cargo, in a sense, and that was, we're talking about the slave trade here, something that we're grappling with, the sort of legacy of that we're grappling with today. But had we been here, stood here over a long period of time, we'd have been witness to all of these things happening. We go back even further to the start of the 17th century, and we'd have been in great peril. There was a huge flood, the flood of 1607, probably a tidal surge. Some people say it was a tsunami, tidal surge, but that swept a couple of thousand people to their deaths on the coasts, both on the Welsh side and on the English side. So again, a lot of things happening. Yeah, I mean, had we been here 1,000 years ago, we'd have been concerned about invaders from France, the Normans, heading this way. Of course, they would eventually set up camp in Wales, and we've had established their mark on the landscape. And then 1,000 years before them, the Romans came this way. They were looking to Wales for riches, gold at places like Dolarcothi, and they established a fort not far from here, Caerwent and Caerleon, and marched further west. But they'd have come across this channel. This was Sabrina, the Severn to them, Sabrina. And Sabrina was a river deity, if you like. But we can go way back before the Romans to peoples of the Bronze Age and the Late Stone Age, and the very earliest people to have come across from Europe and then through what is now England into what is now Wales. Those names didn't apply back then. They'd have found not this extraordinary expanse of water that we're familiar with today, but a much smaller river, an early version of the River Severn, flowing down the centre here. And it's only in the times, in the millennia since, that sea levels have risen to where they are today. They've been pretty constant for the past 6,000 years. But our early ancestors, they wouldn't have seen the islands of Flatholme and Steepholme as we see them today. Those would have been hills that rose out of a broad grassy plain, possibly a forested plain, but nevertheless full of animals, full of prey, which they'd been hunting. We're talking about hunter-gatherer societies, and it's in the millennia since that these lands have been drowned. And there's a certain sadness to that. We have the legend, if you like, or is it a folk memory, of the lost Cantrev. of Lyonesse and so forth. And I think these are probably real memories that have been handed down over the period, one generation to the next, of the lands that were lost as world sea levels rose around the coast of Wales, around the British coast, and indeed globally. And of course, if we look forward into the future, sea level rise is starting again, and that's a concern for us. So when we look at these islands as they are today, if we were to venture into a future Wales 100 years hence, 1,000 years hence, we'd still have these islands here, but they'd be smaller again because sea levels would have risen. The speed we can only guess at, but we've got some control potentially over that speed, because we're talking now not so much about a natural rise in sea levels as one that is, well, the term we use is anthropogenic. It's something that we've got control over, or that we have perhaps temporarily lost control over, as a result of the pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But this is one of the places, the special places, where you can look back into the past and you can imagine futures where these things may yet come to pass. But it's still in our gift to change the future, and I do hope we can do that. So yeah, a special place to come, as I say, both for today, but for the past and for the future. Although words in any tongue can match the task of expressing all of mankind's collected joy found in nature since that first day, we were gifted paradise. Although words in any tongue can match the task of ensuring we understand our place in nature's scheme and knowing what we must not break, our imperfections cannot but out. Although words in any tongue can match the task of nurturing in us a calling to perform respectful stewardship of our common wealth, is there wisdom enough to share? Although words in any tongue can match the task of grieving for all that has been lost or swept aside, and also that which will yet fade into memory, the greatest tragedy unfolds around us. Although words in any tongue can match the task of reconciling ourselves to the knowledge that we might have stopped this dread descent, the more painful for our want of care, might we yet summon words in every tongue that turn us all to compassion for each other, and even now help rebuild our shattered world at this, the latest hour